I am unfortunately under embargo to share what I think of the new Avengers movie, but I will be on Film Week on the 26th and able to share my opinions at that time. 3 hours.
Yeah, you know how I feel about that. I'm sorry. And I get it. Lots of characters, through-line stories.
Well, they keep... At first they were saying it's 22 movies that we have to all tie up. And, we got to bring together the 22-movie thing. And then when they really pressed the Russo brothers, they said, really, it's pretty much just tying up the first two Avengers movies or even the last Avengers movie and, Civil War. That's pretty much all it's tying up.
Yeah, because there's not why do you have to reach all the way back to Iron Man 1? What happened in Iron Man 1?
Or in Black Panther,
or in Black Panther, for that matter, could possibly be relevant, relatively speaking, particularly in the early on, because that's before they started chasing the stones.
I guess in theory, you would need to watch those movies to know who those characters are.
Wow. 3 hours. Sometimes, things Hollywood, or they try to justify themselves.
Sure.
And that's an attempt to justify itself. That other hour, the other 45 minutes.
So who's Gwyneth Paltrow playing? Oh yeah, you got to go back to Iron Man 1 to figure that one out.
Yeah, you're not gonna know the players if you don't have a card.
So who's the bald black lady? What's her scene? Oh, you got to watch Black Panther to understand. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. You actually don't.
No,
you don't need any of that. It's all good. All right. Well, we're gonna dive right into it. We got a ton to talk about today. Gonna dive right into it with PBS. I'm gonna set aside this whole segment for everything PBS. There's some dramatic stuff in here. There's documentary. There's TV series. There's everything in here. Just a really grand collection of stuff. Starting off with the lone Blu-ray of PBS this week. Complete third season of Victoria, which continues to be kind of to live in the shadow of the other series based on Victoria's great-great-granddaughter.
Yeah, double.
Anyway,
Yeah.
The Crown. The Crown is the better show, but Victoria's good too. Victoria's good, and the third season is good. So there's just a lot of legacy history in all of these things, but I do enjoy this series, and I think it looks really, really nice on Blu-ray. Better than if you're watching it streaming, frankly. But Jenna Coleman, big star, in the making. You're going to see a lot more of her. And, this gets into some interesting history, which I don't know how fully accurate it is, with Theodora, the half-sister of Queen Victoria. And we're now like a good solid decade into her reign, and it's at a certain point, they're not going to go for Victoria's complete reign because the show will be like 60 years in the making. Yeah.
Although there's some interesting things to happen.
Yes.
With Mr. Brown.
Yes.
And later with that Indian manservant of hers.
All good stuff.
All good stuff.
All good stuff.
20, 30, 40 years apart, these things.
The installment of Nature, Wild Way of the Vikings. As someone who is descended to some degree from Vikings, I find all of this stuff really, really interesting. Anything pertaining to Vikings and North America and those journeys, anything pre-Columbian is always interesting. Vikings are widely accepted now to have made the journey across the North Atlantic and to have had settlements, not just obviously in Iceland and Greenland, but as far to the west of Scandinavia as Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and various other parts of what is today modern day Canada. So anyway, this is interesting. This gets into all of that stuff and the certain cultural aspects of Viking lore that are really, really interesting. And I thought it was really nicely done by Channel 13 of WNET. So that's Wild Way of the Vikings from Nature. Then we also have American Masters, Joseph Pulitzer, Voice of the People. Pulitzer, really a fascinating figure. What a day that was that we didn't I wonder if they knew what giants they had in Hearst and Pulitzer.
Well, it's interesting. Particularly, I'm from St. Louis. St. Louis, the home of the Post-Dispatch. St. Louis Post-Dispatch. One of the two major papers, though we founded several papers founded by Joseph there, including the New York World, which much of that movie is about, although the St. Louis Post-Dispatch does pop up in that movie. And, of course, the Pulitzer that prize. It's interesting. So both he and William Randolph Hearst were horrible yellow journalists.
Yeah, dreadful.
Just
Oh yeah,
really terrible. Pulitzer went on to regret that,
yeah.
and completely rewrote the notion of what journalism would mean from that yellow.
Redeemed himself, like kind of like Nobel.
Exactly, exactly. Because he invented that dynamite, and you'll notice that there's nothing called the Hertz Prize because he never regretted being a yellow journalist, and he kept doing it until the day he died.
Yeah.
So interesting. It
is. It's a really, really, really good documentary. Great work on here. Liev Schreiber does the voice of Joseph Pulitzer in the actual narration moments, and then the general narration is done by Adam Driver. Also really, really well done. Co-written and directed by Oren Radovsky, who is a superb documentarian. This is a wonderful job. Also from WNET. American Masters, Joseph Pulitzer, Voice of the People. As long as we're on the topic of royals, we also have Margaret, the Rebel Princess. This is a two-part documentary on Princess Margaret, who I remember my mother would talk a lot about. You know, the sister of obviously Queen Elizabeth, and Margaret was, quite just really in her heyday was quite a controversial figure.
She was sassy.
She was. It's the younger siblings that always go a little bit off the reservation, right? The expectations
she wasn't going to go on to be queen. She's not. I'm not going to be the queen.
See, that's what it is.
It's
like, oh, really? You mean I'm not actually going to be a thing? All right, well then I'm just going to do what I want.
It's why Harry married that sister.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm not going to be the king. I'm marrying the brown chick.
Apparently they're not getting along so well there. They got to make a movie about that one.
That's terrible.
We've got Boss, the Black Experience in Business, documentary by Stanley Nelson, which is really, really superb too. Tim and I talk a lot about this. There just is not enough emphasis on the business and the industrial history of what a lot of Black American entrepreneurs did in the early part of the 20th century, especially. And this is really, really superb. This goes all the way over about a century and a half, and it really is excellent. And you're going to learn a lot about it. You're going to learn a lot about entrepreneurs and significant business people you'd never heard of before, because the public education system doesn't,
including women.
Including women.
And Madam C.J. Walker. I think they're making a movie about Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker, first black female millionaire. But you can say it that way, but what you can really say about her is she's one of the first millionaires, period. Yeah. So a black woman more than 100 years ago, hair care products and devices and whatnot is what she invented with no education whatsoever. And Madam C.J. Walker, they're making a movie about her now.
Man, and I'm a big fan of Lovey Yancey, who created Fatburger here in Los Angeles, and that was a legendary. It still is. It's my favorite fast food place. I will not go anywhere else. I go to Fatburger. An installment of Nova, Flying Supersonic. Really quite interesting. People today it's weird. Like, we have a generation today that doesn't really have connection to landing on the moon, and they don't really have a connection to supersonic passenger travel.
Yeah.
Those are things that happened and then went away.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
And it's really strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
that was the thing when you and I were kids. The notion of getting on the
Concorde.
That Concorde. You couldn't fly it transcontinental. You had to fly it across the Atlantic. Because of that sonic boom, and everybody was afraid of the sonic boom. I don't even know what we were afraid of.
I don't know.
I guess it was just irritating.
Well, 15. The final flight of the Concorde was 15 years ago. Believe it or not, it feels like longer than that.
It does.
I know, but this gets into the race to build the Concorde, and how we're actually looking at building a supersonic passenger jet again to make it now more viable and more commercial and more sustainable, which is sort of the same thing that I think they're doing to get men back on the moon. Is, the original moon landing was not really designed to be a repeatable, sustainable event. It was more designed to be, let's beat the Russians.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh crap, this is going to be really expensive to do this over and over. Now we're trying to get a pipeline going. And I think it's the same thing here. Very, very interesting. I never saw a Concorde, but I did see video of the Concorde when it landed at Air France.
I saw the Concorde. Well, that's right, because you would have,
I worked at Air France, and it was interesting. We also have two more from nature here: a Squirrel's Guide to Success and Dogs in the Land of Lions. Squirrel's Guide to Success is really just, it's very simple. It's narrated by Anna Gasteyer, who I always enjoyed when she was on SNL. And you're just looking basically at the life of a squirrel, nuts and predators and trees and games and running across roads when you shouldn't be and getting squashed by cars and all the other things that squirrels do better than anybody else. But it also gets into the family of squirrels, which gets into prairie dogs and everything else. It's fine. It's very educational. It's cute. Kids will love it. Dogs in the Land of Lions is essentially a portrait of a family of African wild dogs and how they live and thrive and survive in the rich ecosystem of Africa with so much wildlife and everything else. Very, very interesting. Also narrated by Tom Hargis. And directed with quite aplomb by Robin Keane Young. Very, very good. Very solid. Similar to that, but this is not a nature thing. This is a Nova thing because it gets into more of the science of it, is World's Fastest Animal. And World's Fastest Animal is about the peregrine falcon, which can dive at over 200 miles an hour, which is faster than any other living thing on Earth can move under its own power, unless it's a human being at the very, very end of a failed skydive, at which point you're going faster than 200 miles an hour, but you're also not going to survive. So, but yeah, peregrine falcons are really extraordinary, and what enables them to go to do all of these amazing things. There's a lot of science to this. There's a lot of biology. There's a lot of science. It's really, really very interesting. And it's good stuff. Kids will love this too. Documenting Hate is a Frontline and ProPublica collaboration that deals with Charlottesville and New American Nazis. It obviously takes Charlottesville as its cue to start examining what's going on. Who were these people involved in the rally, and how does this connect to the history of other such groups in the U.S. like the KKK, and is there a straight through line, or is there kind of a sideways thing? And it's a little bit sort of all over the place of necessity, because it's only 120 minutes long, and that's a big subject to wrap yourself around. But it does get into the resurgence of this movement right now, where it came from, what their ambitions are, and whether or not it really is just kind of a sort of a happenstance attack, or whether this is something that is a growing problem and that we need to worry about going forward. This is a conversation starter. This is not something that comes to any conclusions or any or delivers any great prescriptions for how to deal with this, but it is a great conversation starter. It creates awareness, and that's all we can really ask for at this point. And I hope it doesn't go any further. But it's pretty chilling stuff. Another couple of novas: Addiction and Volatile Earth. Addiction obviously ties in with the opioid epidemic and things like that. Legal drugs like OxyContin that have become a huge illicit drug at the same time, and what we can do to sort of deal with treatment, and what addiction is all about under opioids as opposed to addiction under other things. Just a good rock solid nova. Volatile Earth is a volcano thing. It's not as cool as the Werner Herzog volcano documentary, which goes into all kinds of weird directions. But
we had the 3D one.
It's just so cool. The Werner Herzog thing. It's so cool. Molten magma. I just love it when he says those things. Molten magma. No, but this is a nice 2-part nova that gives you everything you ever needed to know about volcanoes and in every single corner of the world, and how absolutely horrifying and terrifying they are, and how many people actually still live near volcanoes and are threatened by volcanoes should they ever erupt. That's the thing that I always found that really kind of flabbergasted me. We have A Chef's Life, The Final Harvest, which is, it's kind of sad to see this go. The 5 years, this show has really developed quite a following, and it will now be no longer. But it's quite great. This is, it's just been a really, really fun show, and great for people who love food and who love traveling and everything else. So there you go. The Final Harvest is out there. Frankie Drake Mysteries, the complete first season. So I want to talk about this for a second. This takes place in the 1920s in Canada, specifically in Toronto. and follows female detectives as they pursue some very unusual cases. And it's a really, really cute show, and it's very clever, and it's unorthodox, and it has a certain bizarre Canadian sensibility to it, a little bit kind of a little wickedly funny, and the places that they go in the 1920s have all kinds of really interesting socio-political ramifications to them. So it's an interesting commentary on place and time and mores and all the rest of that, and it's worth checking out. I hope there are many more seasons of this. They're clearly having a lot of fun. Frankie Drake Mysteries, the first season. Also very interesting is Mrs. Wilson, with Ruth Wilson and Ian Glenn, which is one of the better masterpieces or parts of the Masterpiece series recently aired here in the U.S. Takes place in 1963 and immerses you in a fascinating kind of wartime, Cold War era espionage tale that is a little bit kind of a little bit female James Bond, a little bit Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It really it's a very, very interesting story, and it's apparently all true. Obviously, I don't know to what extent it's been dramatized, but it's pretty cool. It's all about well, I'll let you check it out. It's all about it's all about a woman's quest to unravel the truth behind something tragic that happens. That doesn't give anything away. All right, Mrs. Wilson. It's very, very cool. Let's see, which of these? Here we go. I'll do this one next. The Dictator's Playbook. I have my mother grew up under Hitler, so I have a bit of a bone to pick with most dictators, all dictators. But this is what's interesting about this is that this is not just a condemnation of dictators, but it actually tries to do the thing that I think we don't do often enough, which is why do they happen? What happens in a society that allows people to accept dictatorship? And that's a much tougher subject to wrestle with, and it's not just about cults of personality and evil manifestations of power. There are social conditions that are typically common to societies that allow themselves to disintegrate to this point, and this really gets into the root of it. 6 episodes, an episode apiece devoted to Kim Il Sung, the grandfather of the current dictator of North Korea. Saddam Hussein, Benito Mussolini, Manuel Noriega, who of course was never actually the president of El Salvador. No. We have to remember that he was the general. He was
of Panama.
Panama, Panama.
Noriega, yeah, he's the general, ruling general of that junta.
But he was not technically the president. The president was chosen by him. It was a weird arrangement. Like he would pick the guy, and he was always saying, "Well, I'm not head of state. That guy's head of state." But everybody knew Noriega ran the country.
Yeah, Noriega ran the country, and he ran the drugs through the country too.
That's it.
He was also an ally of the United States of America
until he wasn't.
Until he wasn't. Yeah. What's that Clint Eastwood movie? Heartbreak Ridge.
That's it. Heartbreak Ridge.
Yeah.
Francisco Franco of Spain, and then the last one is Idi Amin, who of course was depicted in depicted by Yaphet Kotto in Raid on Entebbe, and who won Forrest Whitaker a very deserved Academy Award.
Last King of Scotland. Yeah, man.
Yeah, Idi
Amin. Oh man.
And then the last 3 here: Einstein's Quantum Riddle for Nova. Einstein is such a fascinating figure. Tim knows that years ago my mother used to care for a sculptress who lived to be well past 100. I made a little documentary about her, and she was a personal friend of Einstein's and did a bust of him that is now at UCLA. So I've heard many Einstein stories in those personal meetings, and I interviewed her for many hours as well. And it's really, really fascinating. And so it's interesting when you see this and you get into all of the aspects of quantum mechanics, stuff that even Einstein himself couldn't necessarily solve. So this gets into all of that stuff. It's not relativity; it's everything else, and how it pertains to present day quantum computing, and it's really very interesting. Quantum mechanics and quantum physics is just a whole weird, mysterious area.
That cosmological constant.
So bizarre.
He did not like the idea of that, but
Attenborough and the Sea Dragon. from Nature and BBC Earth is looking at an ancient dinosaur-like freaking weird creepy thing called an ichthyosaur that I hope they never resurrect. And that is just one utterly bizarre extinct thing, and they do this whole reconstruction that is just really creepy. And I'm glad David Attenborough's doing what he is, but man, is that creepy. And then lastly, American Experience, Sealab. People don't even realize now, Sealab was a thing when I was a kid. Back in the late 1960s, they created this thing called Sealab, which was basically a big, giant, not very mobile submarine that they just dropped down into the water. And scientists would go down for months at a time and just learn stuff. It was like Skylab, except in the ocean. And it was really amazing. And it discovered all kinds of incredible things and discovered new life forms and new species and gave us all kinds of knowledge about the oceans that we never had before. And then we just forgot about the damn thing. So
in some ways, with respect to that stuff, so like all of man's space travel, obviously.
Yep.
Things like Sealab and Skylab, all of which were things that, as you said, happened when you and I were teenagers. Skylab was 77. I think Skylab came down in 78, maybe. I remember there was a whole thing about where will it land. All of these things that we tackled as humanity, but very often as the United States of America, that we do not do anymore, and seem to somehow be losing the impetus to do, and in some cases the knowledge of how to do.
True.
But scarier than all of that, a belief on the part of some people, particularly younger people, that we did any of these things at all. These things are like myth to them.
See, and that's
I'm dealing with some kids who do not believe that we walked on the moon.
See, that's so disappointing. That's so disappointing and depressing.
You know, it's really it's crazy, kind of crazy.
All right. New movies.
A couple of them anyway. On Blu-ray and DVD, Tito and the Birds, perfectly lovely, absolutely stunning animation. From a year or so ago. Did this get nominated?
No.
Did it not get nominated?
No, it's a little too freakish in terms of the character design. I think it freaked people out. Freaked me out a little bit.
The storyline was a little complicated too.
Yeah.
So it's a 10-year-old boy who lives with his mother, and there's this epidemic of disease that starts to spread over the world, and he figures out that it has to do with the people. With what happens to people when they become afraid, when they get scared. When they get scared, they open themselves up to be able. His father, who's gone missing, has something to do with this disease. He has to go out and try to find his father so he can figure out what he can do to sort of rid the world of this disease, which really means ridding the world of fear. Because that's when the disease overcomes you when you're afraid. I mean, that's kind of heavy psychological stuff there.
Yeah,
but it is a lovely film, Tito and the Birds. Special features include an interview with the director and writer and producers of the film, as well as the theatrical trailer. This very, very, very creepy and disturbing movie called The Witch.
Oh man, this is on 4K now. Why would they do that to me?
Yeah, because it's a very difficult movie to watch. Although it's pretty gory. It's set in 1630s England.
This really does capture the just horrific moment of when people thought witches were real. It really puts you into the mindset of thinking maybe that crap was once real. It really does. It's creepy.
It's sort of the reverse of the thing that we were just talking about a second ago with respect to technology. There was this moment when people believed these things and thus did all kinds of horrible things to each other in fear of witches and the devil. This family living on the edge of nowhere, wives, kids, the crops start to go bad, the animals start to die. In a belief in witches causes everybody to sort of turn in on themselves. Anyway, fairly intense film.
Yeah.
On 4K, The Witch.
Got a couple other new ones here from Oscilloscope, including one of my favorite films of last year. The first one is Columbus by Kogonada. This was known. This got a little bit of attention mainly because John Cho delivers such a great performance in it. It's a very unusual movie. It's done in a very austere, almost kind of Eastern European style. And for those who don't know, Kogonada is a Japanese artist. Is my understanding. I'm not familiar with any of the other art, but nonetheless, it deals with the son of an architecture scholar, played by John Cho, who is for reasons that it's a little bit too elaborate to get into, but finds himself in Columbus, Indiana, for not any reason that he ever planned, and develops a friendship with a young woman played by Haley Lou Richardson, who's just she's just a kid in the library, and she loves architecture. And it sort of follows the evolution of their relationship, set against this really interesting architectural background
Mm.
in Columbus, which I wouldn't have necessarily thought. But it's the first film by Kogonada, and it is very slow. It is really slow, but it has some really good performances in it, and it's very nicely done. So it was a bit of an independent hit last year, and it's worth checking out if slow and architectural and artsy is your thing, and if you like John Cho. On Her Shoulders by Alexandria Bombach is one of my favorite films of last year. It's a tremendous documentary. It's about Nadia Murad, who is the Yazidi girl who escaped from ISIS. She spent years as basically a sex slave, then escaped, and has since become a massive international icon and human rights activist, and doesn't really want it, is what's interesting. This is not a celebration of her. This is a fly on the wall look at what it means to become an unwilling celebrity, where all she ever really wanted to do was to have a salon and
Mm.
help women in her country look beautiful.
Mm.
And next thing you know, one of the greatest human tragedies of all time has happened, and it destroyed her life. And yes, she's in a different place now, but it's not a life she would have chosen, to be famous or anything of that sort, to be an activist. There
Yeah.
are moments in this movie that will reduce you to a puddle, to an
Yeah.
absolute puddle, and it is just so brutal and so tough to watch. But it's about more than just her, more than about the issue of ISIS and the Middle East. It's about celebrity too,
Mm.
and when you get thrust into it, and how our media world treats people. It is just really a superb film. It is absolutely top notch. On Blu-ray from Oscilloscope, On Her Shoulders.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Some TV?
Yeah, let's do TV.
Let's see. Started off with Steven Universe, the complete second season. Love this animated series from Rebecca Sugar. Rebecca Sugar, of course, gave us Adventure Time and Hotel Transylvania, and all sorts of very quirky, funnily drawn and conceived animation and cartoons that popped up over the years on everything from FX to the Cartoon Network, including Steven Universe, which is a very sort of odd and quirky series about a young fellow named Steven Universe, who's half human and half Jim, who wanders across the universe trying to protect humanity from all sorts of horrible things, including these other gems, the white gems, which intend to destroy us. So we have. It's really sort of an interesting notion that exists inside this show. You have all these gems, amethyst and quartz and whatnot, and there's like creatures, actual beings.
Yeah.
That sort of roam around doing things. A really interesting mind, Rebecca Sugar, to come up with all of that kind of stuff and put it out there. Steven Universe from the producers of Adventure Time. Master of Dark Shadows, the Gothic World of Dan Curtis. Dan Curtis, of course, being the creator of
Dark Shadows. And a lot of other cool movies, that Frankenstein and Dracula in the era.
So
yeah.
he's a real sort of scholar of the Gothic there.
Yeah.
Dark Shadows was fantastic from about 1966 up until like about 1969 or so. Dark Shadows was this television series about Barnabas Collins, a vampire. Now, what was interesting about this show is it was basically a late afternoon soap opera set in this world that included eventually ghosts and witches and all kinds of stuff, but it was really just a straight ahead soap opera with these characters. Loved Dark Shadows. This documentary is about Dan Curtis and that series, as well as many of the other things that he produced. It includes Ian McShane and Whoopi Goldberg and many people who grew up watching these shows and Ben Cross and other shows that were created. And some of the wonderful, wonderful actors that came through Dark Shadows, including David Shelby and Jonathan Freed and Carl. It's just so many wonderful actors actually came through Dark Shadows, that wacky series from the late 60s and early 70s. It's really, really great. Master of Dark Shadows, The Gothic World of Dan Curtis. Lots of bonus features on this DVD too,
Sweet.
DVD as well.
Sweet.
The Dick Cavett Show, Volume 3. Love everything about The Dick Cavett Show. The Dick Cavett Show. Between 1968 and 1996, The Dick Cavett Show aired, a show called The Dick Cavett Show starring Dick Cavett, aired in various different formats and on various different networks, including ABC, CBS, PBS, the USA Network, CNC, NBC. That's how many networks over the course of some 40-odd years Dick Cavett traversed, pretty much doing the same thing he did from day one. Sitting there, being very erudite and smart and bright and talking to some of the other most erudite and bright and smart people in the nation. One of the things that I always loved about the Dick Cavett Show is that he didn't shy away from politics or political figures. A lot of the talk show hosts from back in the day, Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin, would have politics and political figures on their shows back then. Sitting right next to Sammy Davis Jr. and Joey Heatherton.
Yep.
You'd have Bella Abzug, and the conversations would be fairly sophisticated across the board. One of the other things I loved about the Dick Cavett Show, and because he did last so long, you see all of these absolutely extraordinary figures. This set here, contains several of the more important figures in the comedy world. So we start with Dick Gregory in the late 60s. We do some Red Fox. We go to Richard Pryor.
Fantastic.
And in the middle 80s, Eddie Murphy.
Nice.
That's the gamut that Dick Cavett covered, and those were the kind of people on the show. So,
it was a great show. I used to love watching that show.
Oh, I could love it. It's just fantastic. These range from 1972 to 1990, by the way. These various different appearances on the Dick Cavett Show, Volume 3.
Season 6 of A Place to Call Home from Acorn TV. This is this. I can't believe this has been on for 6 years already. That's just absolutely kind of mind blowing. This takes place in 1959 in Australia, and it's really just a straight up kind of like somewhere between Downton Abbey and Dynasty. Set in Australia in the late 50s, and that's it. It is it's just a wonderful family drama. It's a great period piece. And for 6 years, they've been able to maintain this this drama and this soap opera in a really, really compelling way. It's really good. Obviously, it doesn't have the same level of following, the same mystique as something like Downton Abbey. It's not as interesting a period of time, but what a great cast, and it's really cool. 10 episodes, just about 9 hours worth of stuff, and that is season 6 of A Place to Call Home from Acorn TV.
Good. Marley's Ghost, seasons 1 and 2. This is just a funny little British series that I rather enjoyed. It's about a woman. Her name's Marley. Sarah Alexander, who's on this other British series called Coupling that I used to love way back.
Yeah. I remember Coupling.
The old 90s or something.
Loved
like
Coupling.
A great show. It was Friends before Friends. In any case, in this series, she can talk to the dead. She can see and talk to the dead. The dead people who she mostly talks to include her husband, her boyfriend. And the vicar, and it's clever and it's very funny. This is seasons 1 and 2, and you'll probably enjoy it.
Archer, a series I've never really gotten, animated show. Archer, Danger Island, the complete season 9. I get it. It's like this acerbic sense of humor, and it's really very funny, cute, clever. I get it. It's got kind of a retro vibe and all that jazz. But okay, I guess. Anyway, this was all taking place on a South Pacific island in 1939, and it means to have, I think, kind of a sort of a World War II era Indiana Jones thing going on a little bit in animation, but it just feels very cliched, right? It feels very pulpy. We've been there and done that with the quicksand and the whole all that island stuff. Don't really get it. Johnny Quest kind of did that in a less obvious and ostentatious way.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's not for kids. Obviously, it's very adult animated thing. It's got that whole kind of Adult Swim vibe going to it. Yeah. There's a couple extra features, but there it is. Archer, Danger Island, complete season 9.
It's okay. Never much got into Archer. It's kind of okay. The Big C with Laura Linney, the complete series, Golden Globe winning series. This is really such a very, very good. A good series, and I'm glad that it didn't last years and years and years and years. Won a few seasons and sort of like answered all the questions and took care of it. A lot of good acting, a lot of good performances from very interesting people. It's about a young woman, a young teacher, youngish, 40, who gets a diagnosis with a melanoma, and she decides what she's going to try to do with the rest of her life. And what's this going to mean? It has to do with her family, who is kind of self-absorbed, and some strings she's left dangling across her life. You know what's interesting about this series? I used to think when I was watching it. So you have this series, which is about a woman who gets diagnosed with cancer and what it means to her and what she does with her life.
Yep.
And then you have one that's the exact same thing about a man who gets diagnosed with it, and that series is Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And he becomes a drug dealing
dealer.
meth head. And I'm like, man, big difference between the boys and girls. And the way we handle the exact same things there. Anyway, I actually enjoyed this quite a bit. Fantastic.
Patricia Arquette won a Golden Globe for Escaped at Dannemora, which was this limited series that Ben Stiller directed. And boy, do they let you know. They slap a big old ad right on top of this thing saying, Golden Globe winner, Patricia Arquette. It's a good cast. Paul Dano and Benicio del Toro co-star. And this was a limited Showtime series from Ben Stiller that deals with the prison break in upstate New York and the manhunt that ensued. And it's for those who didn't follow this at the time, it's quite fascinating because you remember that the only reason they were able to escape was because there was a woman who worked at the prison that became complicit. She was their inside person, and that, of course, is played here by Patricia Arquette. But man, what a really, really well done overall effort this is. Ben Stiller and Patricia Arquette and some of the others do an audio commentary, and there's some featurette stuff on here as well. Important to remember that this has some amazing writers working on it, including Michael Tolkien and Jerry Stahl, and it is just absolutely superbly well put together. Very, very solid, and like most of these limited series now, it understands that some stories don't fit necessarily in 2 hours or 3 hours or even 4 hours. You got to let them breathe. You got to kind of work them out a little bit. And they do their very level best with this. It's really beautifully put together, and Showtime continues to make strides that put it right at the heels of HBO every step of the way. All right, let's get into some older movies and stuff.
Okay.
We got a lot of Kinos here. And so let's plow through the Kino collection of titles. Kino just keeps knocking it out of the park, man. Like Arrow and Criterion, it's very, very impressive the stuff they come up with. We only have these are all Blu-rays except for one. This one is the lone DVD here. Is a German film called The Invisibles by a director named Klaus Raffel. And this takes place in 1943 and is allegedly based in a true story. And it amazes me, the true stories that keep coming out of the World War II period, the Holocaust period, that we haven't heard yet. It's really quite extraordinary that this hasn't been done before. This is about 4 people who were after the quote unquote final solution was initiated, and Goebbels really kind of lowered the boom on rounding up everyone in Germany who could be perceived to even have a drop of Jewish blood. This is about 4 people who were able to build basically their own underground spy networks in order to survive. And it's utterly fascinating. It's extraordinary what these people went to, the lengths to which they went. Like, if I were in this, I would just leave the country. Just get out. Find a way to get out. Why stay? Why stay? Why go through all that? Why put yourself at risk every single day to be, on the verge of being killed? It's why do that? And that's what makes their courage and their ingenuity and their resourcefulness so fascinating. It's really, really interesting. It's a good film. It's called The Invisibles, and I wish it were on Blu-ray because it would be a wonderful film to put on Blu-ray. And then we have from the Kino Classics line 3 interesting films here that kind of dovetail with this a little tiny bit. The Informer, which is a brand new restoration by the British Film Institute National Archive that features a brand new score as well. This is a film from 1929 and kind of a lost British film in many respects. People don't really start paying attention to a lot of British movies until around about the late 1930s, early 1940s, that Pygmalion, David Lean period. And there's a lot that went on before that. And this is really quite an extraordinary movie. This is a silent film. 1929, they weren't yet doing sound films in the UK, and although it does have a sound version of it at 84 minutes long, it's a little bit shorter, but it is effectively a silent film and quite a stylish and riveting one. And if you set this against some of the other British films from the period that still have a profile, almost all of which are Hitchcock's spy films, and at least his one silent with The Lodger, you get a sense of what really is kind of going on in British film at the time. It's really quite fascinating. And this is based on a novel that John Ford adapted into a sound film in 1935 as well. So it's basically about a bunch of Irish revolutionaries in 1922, and what happens when they get themselves into a real sticky situation. Very stylish, very interesting film. Underground is the Anthony Asquith movie from 1928 that kind of falls into a very similar period and gives you added depth to the silent period of the silent era of British filmmaking. This is also, a really interesting kind of Kafka-esque high style thing. You realize that the high style filmmaking wasn't just going on in Germany. And then lastly, another Anthony Asquith movie, Shooting Stars, which is a surprisingly funny movie. I didn't realize that they could laugh in England in the 1920s, and apparently they could. 1928, and this is a absolutely wonderful, clever, cool movie that's kind of self-reflexive. It looks at they were already seeing some of the interesting intricacies that went on in filmmaking at the time, so they made a movie about making movies, and it's really it's quite fun. It's really a lot of fun, and it has historical value as well in terms of showing us what's going on behind the scenes. So it's definitely worth checking out. And then we have a collection of regular Studio Classics titles from Kino that are a little bit all over the map, but some obviously are better than others. James Stewart and Julia Adams in Bend of the River, directed by Anthony Mann. Kind of a standard issue Western. Anthony Mann made a ton of these, and Jimmy Stewart starred in a ton of them. Nothing terribly distinguishes this above the others. It's kind of the same as most of the others, except that it has a nice turn by Rock Hudson in it, where he doesn't have to hold the screen, where he just lets Jimmy Stewart do all the other stuff. And that has an audio commentary by Toby Roan of the Roan Group, which is fun. We also have Scream and Scream Again, which is one of Vincent Price's Hammer roles from 1970, along with the other two Hammer standbys, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. All of them very, very reliable, and it's perfectly fine. Directed by Gordon Hessler. It's a serial killer in London thing. Nothing. It's kind of standard issue Hammer thing. Tim Lucas does the audio commentary there. House of the Seven Gables with George Sanders and Vincent Price is perfectly fine. This is obviously based on the Nathaniel Hawthorne work and adapted here by Lester Cole and Harold Green, and it is fine. It's a little bit stiff, made in 1940. A little bit kind of studio bound, but otherwise is somewhat faithful to the source material. The Strange Door with Charles Laughton and Boris Karloff. This is fun because of Charles Laughton and Boris Karloff, because they're both such terrific actors, and they really, really nail this. This is based on Robert Louis Stevenson's The Sire de Malatoit's Door, and that's a work that I had never heard of. I'm not familiar with it. I think most people probably aren't that familiar with it. Made in 1951 and directed by a guy who would go on to direct many Star Trek episodes, the great Joseph Pevney. But really, you're watching this not for any great kind of Gothic or 19th century Victorian thrill. You're watching this just to see two great actors really, really ham it up, and it's a lot of fun. The Land Unknown. It's a little bit cheesy, but enjoyably cheesy. Made in 1957. This is kind of one of those H.G. Wells, hidden world, forgotten world, whatever that was. This is another one of those. You find a part of the earth that still has dinosaurs, and you have a few bad special effects, and people in 1957 thought that they were watching something really, really cool. Not really. It's a little silly, but it's a flash from the past and directed by a guy who had done a lot of those things, Virgil Vogel, who did the Mole People. So it's kind of cheesy, but in a nostalgic, fun way. Charles Bronson in Cold Sweat, along with his wife Jill Ireland, and of all people, Liv Ullmann and James Mason. Totally bizarre. Directed by Terrence Young, a real solid action director of the period. And this is pretty much a standard issue Charles Bronson movie of the era, made in 1970. He's in the south of France, and his past catches up with him, and some bad people come. And next thing you know, he has to, he's got to somehow become. He's got to make a decision. He's got to go. He's got to be a bad guy or a good guy, and he chooses to be Charles Bronson guy. And then lastly, here's the real discovery this week. Becky Sharp. Miriam Hopkins in Becky Sharp, along with Cedric Hardwicke and some other fine actors of the day. Made in 1935 by director Ruben Mamoulian, who was once given an award by the LA Film Critics and wrote a wonderful essay that has just been resurrected by one of our members, which we will post on the lafka.net website shortly, where he praises why film critics are awesome, and we, of course, want to get that up there. But what's significant about Becky Sharp, directed by Ruben Mamoulian in 1935, is this is the first 3-strip Technicolor movie ever made. First full Technicolor movie. There were 2-strip Technicolor movies made in the 20s, but this is the first time people got a real glimpse of a serious Technicolor movie. And it obviously paved the way for Snow White and the Adventures of Robin Hood and Gone with the Wind. And then, it was a steady path right into the 60s until black and white was extinct. But basically, this is based on Vanity Fair, and does a pretty wonderful job of working with all of the aspects of Thackeray's opulent drama at a time when the movies weren't quite up to doing it. By the time we get to Barry Lyndon and Kubrick, then you can pretty much do anything you want to put William Makepeace Thackeray on the screen. But at the time, this was quite an ambitious movie. There just weren't the tools in terms of photography and sound to really go all the way. So what it does is really, really pushing the envelope. And it's a big melodrama set against the Napoleonic Wars. And if you saw the Reese Witherspoon version of it from a few years ago, directed by Mira Nair, you know the story. It's basically the same story. But nonetheless, this is really a significant thing. It's a decent transfer. Probably could be better, but nonetheless, you're gonna see it better than they even saw it at the time. So that's Becky Sharp from 1935, the first 3-strip Technicolor movie ever, starring Miriam Hopkins, and it is on Kino Blu-ray.
Want me to knock off a few of these over here? This is some interesting stuff. All of a type actually. From Mill Creek, these two, Minutes to Midnight, The Cold War Chronicle. I love this. This is I think there's about 16 films on this, mostly short films that sort of are a sort of collection of Cold War documentaries and informational videos.
Nice.
Of the sort guys just about our age would have probably been watching 10 or 15 years after. Most of these were made in the late 50s, early 50s, late 50s. And
real Cold War
early,
stuff.
Real Cold War stuff. A Day Called X, 1957, black and white, 27 minutes long. And CBS produced this, and it just dramatized the story of an atomic attack on Portland, Oregon. Isn't that just lovely?
Yeah.
Just CBS. Thank you for that.
Why Portland?
I don't know. Probably who the hell knows why. About Fallout. This one's 1963. 24 minutes. Civil defense informational short discusses Fallout. The harm that it can cause, like, burning, anyway, whatever. So fascinating films, 15 of them, all in the context of the Cold War and these short films. I was actually still making films like this when I went into the Air Force in 1979, which, of course, was before the wall came down. And one of the things that we did in informational services was still make films like that. Cold War thrillers. These are narrative films. So this is 6 spy-filled sagas, as they say. Set during the period, and it within the theme from 1960 on up. So we've got a Man on the String, 1960, very good. A little Cold War thriller there. The Ditley Affair, 1966. Otley, which is a neat movie that starred Tom Courtenay, 1968.
Nice.
The Dandy and Aspic, a neat spy movie there. Wonderful thing about that, the score was done by Quincy Jones. Hammerhead, 1968, and The Executioner, 1970. So a whole little range of neat little Cold War-based thrillers there. And then this one, Enigma. Interesting thing about this film, which is also a Cold War era film, 1980 is when this film is set. Interesting thing about this film is directed by Jeannot Schwartz. Jeannot, who is still working, 80 years old, born in 1939,
Serious?
80 years old. He began his career with Ironside, 1968.
Supergirl and Superman
Supergirl,
2?
The Virginian, work your way up through Longstreet. Remember Longstreet?
I had no idea he was still working.
Dr. Welby, on up through all of that. Of course, then as you Black Sheep Squadron and all that. Supergirl. He had the little run of feature films there that started with Jaws 2 in 78, and then Somewhere in Time, which is the one that I love. Me and Bridget both love that movie. Christopher Reeve, who of course would go on to be in Superman, had already been in Superman. And then this film that I'm holding in my hand called Enigma, which stars Martin Sheen and Bridget Fosse and Sam Neill, which is 1980. It's set in Russia, or the Soviet Union, it would have been at the time. Kind of a complicated Cold War thriller that we worked through. But back to Jeannot, he continues to work right up to this day. You've watched him direct Ally McBeal's and CSI Miami's and The Practice and Jags and Numbers. You've watched him direct episode of Heroes and Cold Case.
That's crazy.
Smallville.
I had
You've
no idea.
watched him direct Friends. You've watched him direct Supernatural, which is still on television right this very second.
It's so impressive.
He's
I
got
had no
15 episodes of Bones under his belt from 2015, and just knocked out the latest episodes of Grey's Anatomy.
No kidding.
Jeannot Schwartz, 80 years old. That's what I'm talking about, baby.
There you go. That's it. Don't ever retire, man. Never stop.
Die in the chair, baby.
That's it.
Die in the chair.
I love it.
Jeannot.
I got a few foreign ones here I want to knock out real quickly. Cam Girl is an Italian movie. It's always an Italian movie that does stuff like this. So Cam Girl is about a woman who can't get a job in advertising, so she decides to launch a webcam operation with her friends where they take their clothes off and, do what cam girls do.
Smart move, sister.
Right. But of course, it quickly gets, it becomes a problem, gets out of control, bad element, whatever.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it does what all those roughies and sexploitation films did in the 60s, which is titillate you for 2 hours and then at the very, very end, wag a finger and go, naughty, naughty.
That's what you're getting.
And that way they can have it both ways. So anyway, this is one of those. It's fine. It's an Italian movie. It's a certain kind of Italian commercial movie that's been made for 50, 60 years. And then on the foreign end of Kino, we got a trio of films from Farid Bougadir, the Tunisian filmmaker, who had a bit of a moment, really, never completely caught on, but a bit of a moment back in late 80s, early 90s, and that was sort of the high point, mainly with the movie Halloween Boy of the Terraces. Now, that's one of these three, the 1990s Halloween Boy of the Terraces, which is a coming-of-age movie. It's about a boy who, a Tunisian kid who has his sexual awakening when he at the local Turkish bathhouse, and women in various states of disrobe and so forth. Says a lot about sexuality in the Arab world, especially in North Africa, and culture and coming of age and all the rest of that stuff. Really was a very seminal film at the time because there was just nothing coming out of North Africa in terms of filmmaking except for Orson Welles movies that, that Tunisia would throw money into. And then some people, not as many, saw A Summer in La Coulette, which was made in 1996. And it's basically an erotic comedy, and it takes place in 1967, and it deals with three friends, one Jewish, one is Catholic, one is Muslim, and it, addresses a virginity pact and how all of these cultural and religious and national issues come into play. And very, very autobiographical and very funny, and has a wonderful, wonderful performance by Claudia Cardinale. And that is sort of where Bougadir and his career lay in the West until recently. Zizou and the Arab Spring is a really, really good movie. Might even be the best movie he's ever made because it is so intensely personal. This was made just a few years ago, in 2015, right after the Arab Spring, which some may remember began in Tunisia. Tunisia was the first place where the uprising happened against the regime, and this looks at that entire moment through the eyes of this young kid who's a little bit aimless, and he's got a job in the city, and he's just trying to sort of find himself and find his way, and he gets caught up in this moment, and it is about how that changes him and his friends and his life, and there's always a girl, but it's really good. Zizou and the Arab Spring is maybe the best film that Farid Bougadir has ever made, and it would be nice if his career were rediscovered as a result of this and given another lease so that he could be seen internationally.
Interesting.
Really good filmmaker.
Tunisia, the only place where the Arab Spring actually took.
Yep.
And then turned into something horrible.
I know.
Horribly worse. The Nemesis films, Nemesis 2, 3, and 4. Interesting, Albert Puin directed these movies. Interesting that Nemesis 1 isn't a part of this 3-film collection.
Only the sequels.
Just the sequels.
Yeah, it's wild.
Albert directed them all. Albert, who of course was Albert Puin, interesting guy. First film was Sword and Sorcerer back in 1982.
The only Hawaiian filmmaker in American Hollywood history.
The only one I can, exactly. But interesting, mostly in the science fiction. But I mean, he gave us Alien from L.A.
Captain
and
America.
Cyborg and Captain America. That Captain
The
America,
original
Captain America,
Captain
way back in the day. This and Knights and a whole bunch of kickboxer films.
Yeah.
And he's a sorceress. He's still got some stuff going on out there to this very day. So Albert Puin still hanging.
Good
in there.
on you, Albert.
Good on you, Albert. Knock it out, baby. Nicolas Cage in Vengeance, a Love Story. Nicolas had a little run of movies here the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh my god!
His voice in Into the Spider. He has a voice in Into the Spider-Verse,
Yeah.
notwithstanding. But he had a little run of movies here in the last couple of years that have just been off the chain, bananas, just crazy. Mandy was one of them.
Yeah.
This is another one. This is basically just a Death Wish sort of old school Charlie Bronson kind of thing. Cop. Has wife, and a daughter. Wife is brutally murdered in front of his daughter. The daughter actually identifies the attackers, but some slick lawyer, I think played by Don Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, gets them off, and Nick decides he's just going to kill everybody. He just decides, you know what? That's okay, I got it.
That's what he does.
I got it. I'm just going to kill everybody in the movie. How about that? How about that?
Does.
Nick Cage. I love the name of the movie, Vengeance, a Love Story. You want to knock that one off?
Yeah, let me get this out. 1973's Beyond Atlantis. This is a VCI release. VCI now releasing stuff through MVD. And this is region free. You can watch this anywhere in the world if you want to grab this. It's Blu-ray of the classic cult film Beyond Atlantis. Once again, made in the wonderful vintage year of 1973. And this is about a bunch of people who are just looking for pearls, and somewhere out in the Pacific, and at least I think it's the Pacific, and I think it's like near Philippines or whatever it is. Anyway, and they happen upon an island where people are a little bit weird, a little bit freaky, and that, of course, leads to a discovery that they are descendants of the people who populated Atlantis, and everything gets weird and freaky and a little bit sexy, and it's just one of those exploitation movies from the 60s and 70s that just has a style and all its own. But the whole reason to see this is just because the bug-eyed attachments that they put on the eyes, these prosthetics, are just absolutely hilarious. They restored this from the original negative with a 2K transfer, and it's perfectly fine looking. It's not going to win any beauty awards because the movie was never that well shot to begin with, but it is a bit of a cult classic, and comes with a bunch of extras, including a commentary by Howard S. Berger, who wrote and directed it, a Pinoy film historian, which is a little bit hilarious, and then video interviews, and including Patrick Wayne, son of John Wayne, who shows up in this for some reason.
Yeah, every now and again, Patrick Wayne shows up. Noir Archive, 9-film collection, 9 films. And what I would call a sort of B-noir run of movies. None of these are particularly namey. Volume 1, this is Volume 1, 1944 to 1954, so it's more or less starting to feel like at the beginning of noir. And you've got Address Unknown in this collection. Address Unknown, The Guilt of Janet Ames, Escape in the Fog, Assignment Paris, which is actually a pretty good movie, 7-Eleven Ocean Drive, not bad. Johnny Allegro was not a bad movie.
Not at all.
Johnny Allegro
No.
was a good movie. the Black Book, and the Miami story. So George Raft and Johnny Allegro would probably be the one that but actually, you know what? Rosalind Russell and Melvin Douglas and The Guilt of Janet Ames is actually a pretty good movie too. So like a
Yeah.
bunch of nine noir film collection. From who is this from? Is this Mill Creek? Yeah, from Mill Creek.
Mill Creek. So we got one from Arrow this week. Scared Stiff. Scared Stiff.
I remember that.
Yeah, I do too. This is from the mid 80s, I think it was. Mid 80s, about mid 80s. And this was directed by Richard Friedman, who did a lot of these things at the time, things like Doom Asylum and a bunch of other kind of cheesy movies of the era. And it's an ancient curse movie. It's just about this, it never when you walk into a house, it's been cursed, and there you go. It's gonna wreak havoc on you, and there you go. Don't go in the attic. And there's nothing particularly unique about it, other than the fact that it, for some reason, has kind of a cult following. And I've tried to figure out why, and it's not because it's particularly good or anybody interesting is in it or the plot is any interesting. It's just all pretty boilerplate, but people do love it. I don't know why, but they do. So there it is. A lot of extras on here. Brand new documentary on this thing, featurettes and stuff on the effects. And there you go. New interview even with the composer. So, I mean, they went to town. People must love this thing. I don't know what the deal is.
Showdown. Billy Blanks. Remember Billy Blanks?
You bet.
Billy Blanks running around back in the day. You know, he's the guy that Jean-Claude Van Damme would beat up in a lot of movies. But a brother with a great body, and every now and again, Billy would manage to get himself cast as the lead in a sort of like a B, C sort of, one of these sort of karate martial arts things.
Then he got smart and he did that workout
Tae Bo, baby.
Tae
Bo, I got that VHS in there right now.
Yeah.
Never did get those Tae Bo abs, so never could quite pull it off. Anyway, this is the Billy Blanks movie with Ken Scott and Christian Tater and Ken McLeod, and it ends up in a bunch of mediocre martial arts, but it's not the worst stuff in the world. I had a lot of fun watching these movies back in the day.
All right, I got a few anime things here, and then we're going to see if we can maybe knock out a few docs. We got Kidvid we'll probably have to save till next week, but a few little anime titles here that are worth making a mention of. From Shout Factory, who's picking up a lot of really, really interesting anime, is the fairly recent A Silent Voice the Movie in a Blu-ray and DVD combo, based on a famous manga. And this is actually, again, we talk about this all the time. These things have the schoolyard politics, teenage politics. That's where a lot of this goes. But this one is actually one of the better ones. It's about a deaf girl and her struggles in adapting to a new school, and how she and this other student kind of discover hope through each other. It's a coming-of-age thing. I'd like to make an analogy to Comrades, Almost a Love Story, the live-action Hong Kong film that by Peter Chan that starred some extraordinary talents, but Maggie Cheung most notably, who won an award at the won Best Actress at the Golden Horse Awards at the time. This has that kind of a vibe to it, except in anime, and it's really beautiful animation from Kyoto Animation, and really worth checking out. A Silent Voice the Movie, good pickup for Shout Factory. Then also is My Hero Academia 2 Heroes from Funimation, which skews younger. This is a Blu-ray DVD combo set with its own Funimation digital copy, which is proprietary, and I wish it weren't but that it weren't. I wish it were something else. But this continues to be a very, very popular franchise. It's a superhero thing, and it's vibrantly and lively animated. But I think it loses a little something in the translation. But nonetheless, My Hero Academia 2 Heroes will play well with the tween crowd. And then also from Funimation is Season 1 of Black Clover, episodes 1 through 51, which comes with a great big nice boxed set, anticipating Part 2, 3, 4, and 5, plus a soon-to-be-released 100-page art book. that's interesting because they are sort of luring you with this packaging and saying, if you buy that big old box, you're not going to be able to keep it empty. You're going to have to buy everything else. So you're really buying season 1, but you're sort of committing to everything else. So that's how they get you with Black Clover. But nonetheless, Black Clover is kind of worth it because it's a really, really cool show. It takes place. It's a magical fantasy saga. And a little bit in that, Lord of the Ringsy style that so many of them are, but it really is beautifully animated, great color, great character design, and it's got a very interesting modern day comment on terrorism that is quite prescient and salient. So there's that.
Shall we do some documentaries?
Yeah, let's do it.
Moynihan, a fantastic documentary by Joseph Dorman and Toby Pearl Friedlich about Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a figure in my life growing up as a a child, really, who became a young person who was always engaged in politics. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, this big sort of Irish-looking guy who seemed sophisticated and wore these bow ties and spoke very well, and who was actually a doctor, had a PhD. Was this singular figure in television and politics and in the culture wars back all through the 60s and 70s. What's interesting about Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who did a great many things, he was a very influential intellectual sociologist, political policy specialist, he was an ambassador, all this kind of stuff.
And he worked across the aisle.
Yeah. Here's the thing about him. He was a blue-collar guy, this guy.
Yeah.
This guy grew up in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, the way he came to me with the bow tie and all that kind of stuff. And he wrote that landmark report on race, which was misread and misunderstood at the time, mostly by the black community, who didn't really understand that Daniel was on our side.
Yeah.
And if you read that report,
a lot of people incorrectly said that it was victim blaming, which it wasn't. It was more like a problem identifying.
Yeah.
And it was
a lot of people misunderstood. Anyway, a fascinating figure of the sort you don't really see much nowadays in politics anymore.
You do not.
After Life After Flash.
I love this.
The Sam Jones, a doc about Sam Jones, who played Flash Gordon in the 1980 Flash Gordon movie. He was also in, I think his first film was 10. That remember the Bo Derek film? Blake, what's his name?
Yeah.
That film. He's in that movie.
Oh, how funny! I don't even think I knew that.
Right before Flash, and then they wanted to have a fairly interesting life and career after playing Flash Gordon in that fairly cheesy movie. Go Flash, go! It was fantastic. All kinds of people show up in this, including our late Stan Lee, talking about that movie and Sam Jones.
Sam Jones is a fascinating guy, and what an interest. Yeah, that's a good doc.
I should let you talk about Hal.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll talk about Hal. I'll talk about both of these in the same breath here that I've got. First one, Saving Brinton, is a wonderful doc. So this is a crucial piece of film history and essential for the library of anybody who wants a library that completely deals with film history. So somewhere in Iowa. It's always a basement. People put movies in their basements. Everybody, if you have a basement, go looking in your basement because there's bound to be film treasures in there somewhere. Basements in Argentina, they find Chaplin movies. Basements in, it's always in a basement somewhere. So in a basement in Iowa, this guy, Michael Zaz, discovered a complete archive, a treasure trove of lost movie treasures. I mean, it was absolutely extraordinary. And it's all Méliès stuff. All of these reels of movies by Méliès that just
Georges Méliès, the noted silent legendary French
father of special effects
in science fiction,
depicted by Ben Kingsley in the Scorsese film
Hugo.
Yeah. But what this is also is a look at the life of William Franklin Brinton, who's the guy who collected them and who projected them and who saved them. And so you're kind of looking at something that's film history, but also the history of a guy who is a central and now was a forgotten and is now a rediscovered part of of film history and film heritage. And it's just an absolutely wonderful, wonderful movie. It's just so insightful and so fascinating, and has so many wonderful twists and turns to it, almost like a thriller in some respects. Michael Zaz and Tommy Haynes, John Richard, Andrew Sherborne, all the entire filmmaking team do a commentary. There's a music featurette with the composer and a theatrical trailer, and it is absolutely wonderful. It's Saving Brinton. And then there is Hal. Hal is a fantastic documentary. It's about Hal Ashby, the great filmmaker of the 60s, primarily the 70s, and a little bit into the 80s. Didn't have a great career kind of down the line, but Ashby began as an editor, basically on In the Heat of the Night.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good friends with Norman Jewison, and who helped him kind of break into directing. And Hal Ashby was known as, he's like a hippie, right? I mean, he smoked a lot of pot, had long hair,
the
beard,
flip-flops,
you know, wore like the whole hippie clothing thing. And whenever he showed it up at a black tie event, he was dressed like he just ran out of Woodstock.
Yeah.
And that was his thing.
Yeah.
And you learn so much about him, his love of movies, his editing philosophy. Jewison is all over this thing. This actually came across my plate because a friend of ours knew the filmmakers when they were trying to raise money for this, and he sent me their lookbook, which was beautiful at the time.
Yeah,
and I try to facilitate some interviews for them, and then next thing you know, everything goes in hibernation. They come out and they have this fantastic movie, and there's a lot of stuff of Ashby's that is not dealt with, and a lot of people they don't talk to. But at the same time, you can't get everybody. Like, you know, you would expect. Well, there are a number of big stars. I won't say, but there are a number of big stars that don't show up here that it would have been nice to have. Nonetheless, it's very complete, and it really does give you a complete portrait of why he was such an amazing filmmaker. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful tribute. Hal from Oscilloscope on Blu-ray.
This couple of fabulous docs right over here. The Gospel According to Andre Leon Talley. One of the preeminent culture, fashion.
Really, really good.
It's just a really, really great documentary. So this was a black man, excuse me, raised in the Jim Crow South.
Yeah.
By his grandmother. A demonstrably gay black man raised in the Jim Crow South by his grandmother, who faced down all that you can imagine, not only to rise to the highest levels of the fashion community, but to become one of the preeminent, and he's just a fascinating human being.
He's also all over the September issue, which is all about the September issue of Vogue.
Of Vogue, Anna Wintour and all that, who's in this doc.
Which my wife worked on, and that was when I first became aware of Andre, because I saw a lot of different cuts of the September issue when they were putting it together, and I was like, who's that guy? There he is again. He's funny. He's really cool. He's got a great way with words. He's just a big, flamboyant, larger than life character.
Larger than life,
and his weight is his one struggle. You know,
now he's become quite large.
He's always struggling with his weight. But you know, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of and an instinctive appreciation for fashion that you can't learn.
No,
you just can't. It's a passion
from a
for
historical sort of context.
Yeah.
And there's really great footage in this of him as a young man going back to the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's just really, really wonderful.
It's a great doc. It's really wonderful. Oh, and there's a point in there where he cries.
Yeah.
Where he cries because someone was cruel to him, and I won't get into it. You know, he deals with the cruelty over his size, cruelty from a racial standpoint, and it's cruelty from people who are in the fashion business and who purport to be very broad-minded and liberal, people who should be his friends, and it shows you how cutthroat that business is. These aren't he suffers more from people in the from liberal people in the fashion business than he ever suffered from
anybody from the Jim Crow South, which
is true. It's so cutthroat, but he's so sensitive. I love that man.
Beautiful, beautiful film. You got a couple over there?
Let's get to Life in the Doghouse. 2 Men, 1 Mission, 10,000 Lives, special edition. I don't know what the non-special edition was about. No, this is about 2 guys who basically created this extraordinary dog rescue, and it's just and that's it. There's nothing else to be said about it. But it's about 2 guys who made a dog rescue, and rescuing dogs their passion, and it was Danny and Ron's Rescue. and over the course of 10 years, they saved the lives of 10,000 dogs.
Yeah.
And it is an unbelievable story. It's really, really, it's very, very touching. Even if you don't like dogs, and who doesn't like dogs, it's beautiful. You'll just weep at every single one of these puppies in this thing.
Just a lovely, lovely thing. At the drive-in, a really wonderful documentary about a specific drive-in, the Mahoning Drive-In, which was just the big last single-screen sort of drive-in in the country. At one point in Pennsylvania, in Layton, Pennsylvania, and it was looking at closing, and it would have been the last one. And it's all about how the people in this community come together to try to figure out a way to save this drive-in. The one big problem is that everything, as you know, it's gone digital, and so now all the projectors are digital projectors. The people here cannot afford a digital projector. They can even afford the people to work in the concession stands. Most of the folks who work there for free. So they decided that one way they might be able to save the drive-in is by running nothing but 35 millimeter print movies on their old 1945, 49 projectors.
Nice.
If they can keep the bulbs from burning out, which was a really good idea, and it's been working so far. So the Mahoning Drive-In and this wonderful little documentary at the drive-in. Man, I love nothing. I can't even begin to tell you the films that my father took me. How many at drive-ins? Even when we first moved here, there was still that drive-in over there on Sepulveda. So, like, what's the sort of south part of Sepulveda?
It's the drive-in that was on. It's sort of over in Fox Hills.
Yeah,
it's all condos now.
Yeah,
that's the one that we got for Schlock.
That's the and that one was not long for the world when you guys did that.
No, that we captured the destruction of it.
Yeah,
that's in Schlock when they blew it up.
That's 20 years ago now.
20 years ago.
Oh,
yeah,
man,
that was my discovery. I wanted us to go shoot there, and they said, yeah, they're going to tear it down. And I said to Ray, oh, it's too bad they're going to tear it down. He goes, we've got to capture that.
Yeah.
And he was right. And
that was the last drive-in theater that I ever saw a drive-in movie in.
We got inside. We have the only footage of that thing being blown apart from inside. And one of those sheets of wood, the plywood, as it came sheeting off, almost took Ray out.
Oh, wow.
It went like 50 feet right across that parking lot. And all the news coverage was outside. They didn't get it from inside. We got it inside.
Yeah.
Well. That's a thing. Anyway, an absolutely horrific family true crime story is the subject of the special edition of The Family I Had. I will not go into the details of what happens in this family. It's so brutal and horrific. I can't even get into it. I can't really recommend this unless you have a real steel constitution, because what happened to this family is deeply disturbing, and you'll have nightmares for weeks. But if you are the kind of person that likes this stuff, The Family I Had is certainly in your ballpark. Just know what you're getting into. It's a story, I guess, that needs to be told, but I don't know that it needed to be told quite like that. And then lastly, I'm just going to make a quick mention. This is not anime, but this is certainly from an anime company. This is from Switchblade Pictures. You can learn more about it at switchbladepictures.net. This is Corpse Prison Part 2. Presumably, I think this is based on a manga, but in any case, if you saw the previous Corpse Prison, you know what this is. This is there's a kind of a ghostly town hidden away in the Japanese mountains somewhere, and it's like this weird kind of a culty deal. I don't want to say it's like the what would it be like? Well, any number of cult movies, I guess, in Hollywood. But it is so a couple of girls wind up falling in with this thing, and next thing you know, there's all kinds of horrific, nasty, gory stuff going on, and it's time to try to escape, and the usual. We've kind of seen variations on this theme many, many times before. I have only a vague recollection of Corpse Prison Part 1, and I don't remember that it needed a Part 2, but nonetheless, here it is. So if you saw Part 1 and you feel like you need Part 2, go for it. Otherwise, doesn't really add much. All right, with that, I think we are done, and we will be back. I can't believe we're almost in May. This year is just burning through.
Tick tock, tick tock.
And I am going at the end of May. I will be taking my wife and daughter to the new Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland.
Wow!
And so we'll see what that looks like. They spent a billion on that extension. It's only like 8 acres.
It better be fantastic.
It had better be. It's going to be so crowded. You have to get you've got to sign up for day and hour admissions. It's going to be so crowded. They're trying to find a way to sort of manage the crowds. I don't see how they're going to do it. It's going to be crazy. All right, with that, we are done. We'll see you guys next week.